Hey!
Hey, Ashley's on. Aw, and Evan.
Hey everyone!
Nice, Jeremy, ready to do the thing. Give everyone a minute.
Hey Dad! Hey everyone, welcome to our third Instagram Live tasting of LaRue wines. I'm sure most of you know about LaRue, but again, I'll just give a quick little summary. LaRue I started in 2009, and it's named after my great-grandmother, Fiona LaRue. I make only 500 cases of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay from the Sonoma Coast, and it is a particular area of the Sonoma Coast that is within 8 to 10 miles of the ocean, and it's kind of a little sliver that really is influenced by the Pacific Ocean quite a bit. We'll be talking a little bit about that today. I am here with David, my fiance.
Hi, how's everyone? Little background on me. I'm a former sommelier that worked in Miami as well as San Francisco, and I work for an amazing winery here in the Napa Valley. But yeah, we are lucky to be joined by two really good friends of mine, Matt Dulle and Jeremy Shanker. I will let them kind of introduce themselves. Let's see if I can do this.
We're going to add them now.
Oh, I always turn it upside down.
Wait. Oh, hit that first. Again, you can see our
Every
porch.
single time. It happens every time.
It's sunny out there today.
It is sunny.
All right.
Hey.
All right. You guys have to put your.
Oh yeah, I gotta go the other way.
You gotta go up.
How's it going? I see Helene and Russell have joined. Welcome.
All right.
Awesome.
We'll just sit extra close.
So I should also say, to add to David's accomplishments, he is also here at 8 a.m. on day one of our lease in this place, which was New Year's Day, to help us move a wine fridge, about a 500-pound wine fridge at 8 a.m.
Yeah.
I'm saying that's a good man right there.
It was
Forever
a
and
good time. We had a lot of fun that day, though.
Yeah, we
I
did.
remember that day too. I stayed in bed.
Yeah.
You made the right call.
So yeah, we should mention, as you guys are roommates, so you're staying at home as a team.
Yes.
But let's tell us a little bit about yourselves.
So I'm Matt Dulle. I'm the beverage director here at Lazy Bear, right around the corner, actually. We're a 2 Michelin star dinner party in the Mission, and we have a deep collection of rare vintage wines from around the world, specializing in a lot of old California stuff and what we think is new and exciting in California, like the LaRue wines.
Yeah, and I'm the lead sommelier at Mina in San Francisco. It's the flagship restaurant for the Mina group, and currently closed, but we have a really great pickup and delivery option. Anyone who's watching, it's under Mina Family Kitchen. If you're looking for a place to support during these times, we're offering a pretty diverse menu across our 4 restaurants in the Bay Area. And I know Matt is doing something with Lazy Bear too.
Yeah, Lazy Bear's been doing our camp commissary. So we do some to-go items, some take and bake kits, some take and bake cookie kits, meal kits, things like that. And then we haven't been selling off the cellar, but we've happy to take advantage of the chance to sell some wines retail to get some of our great old wines into the hands of some people who are stuck at home.
Nice.
I think most people don't have the cellar that we have in their quarantine.
Yeah.
We're lucky.
House is very, very special.
Rapidly depleting, though. Yeah.
You have to be an advanced sommelier and above to live with these guys. It's pretty impressive.
And I saw you're doing cocktails to go too, right?
Yep. Oh yeah. All kinds of fun stuff. Our something we'll probably get suit over at some point. Bear Claw, which is our take on White Claw, but
nice.
no such thing as bad press.
I love it.
And Jeremy, are you doing wine to go as well, or just?
Yeah, there's a nice list of wine available on the Mina Family Kitchen list. So check that out.
Yeah, definitely get out and support. So we want to mention to anybody who has any questions for us during the whole tasting, feel free to ask the questions. And if we miss it, if you're asking in the feed, go ahead and hit the question button and re-ask the question. We don't mind. We also have Russell Rice and Helene Spivak on who are watching with us today. So if you have a question specifically for them, feel free to ask and they could type their answer.
Yeah.
We have all the wines we're tasting, well, except for the 2012, which is sold out. But we do have the wines we're tasting this week available on the website right now. And there is 1 cent shipping right now. So take advantage of that because shipping can get expensive.
Yeah,
So.
it's really nice. Did you guys want to go into how you guys first tasted LaRue and heard about it?
Yeah, I first heard about LaRue when I read the New California Wine, the John Benet book, and I remember John Benet, who was the SF Chronicle wine critic at the time, he singled your wines out as one of the ones to watch in California among a pretty elite group of wineries, and then got the chance to taste the wines. I remember them being involved with the In Pursuit of Balance, that whole kind of wine circle of the new generation of California wine producers who, to me at that time, it was really exciting to see, a return to lighter wines under 14% alcohol. And I remember the first time I had them just being blown away.
Thanks.
And I actually had a couple different intros to them. One, both of which were kind of centered around being up in Healdsburg when I was helping open up Single Thread with last week's guest, Evan and Jade.
Oh yeah, that guy Evan. Yeah.
And one of them was during, Katie, you might remember the event, but it was something we had at the shed where there was it's basically a panel discussion on Pinot.
Oh yeah.
And and at that point, and I hadn't yet heard of Katie, but all the wines were blinded, and pretty much everyone came up with like, oh, this one is just like, these wines are just kind of like a head above everyone else. Like, who the hell is making all of these? And I found out later it was Katie. And then later, I guess the day after New Year's Day, the year before we moved in here, I was driving back from the city with Evan and Jade, and Evan said, let's stop and taste LaRue wines with Katie. And it was the day after New Year's. I didn't really want to taste anything, and was pretty sickened by the idea. But they were good enough that I perked right back up, and
awesome.
I've been a bit of a fan ever since.
That's always good to hear.
And the one other thing that I'll mention, because I know you're too humble to say it about yourself, but you've made some of, not outside of just making the wines for LaRue, you've made some other really great wines under other labels like Reeve and Smith Story. And I'm sure some of the people watching have had the Flowers wines before. Yeah. So you made a lot of really great wines in California, not just under this label.
Thank you. Yeah, that actually is a good transition into Flowers. So we're tasting 2012, 13, and 14 of Rice-Spivak today. And the very first time I started working with this vineyard was in 2007 when I worked at Flowers Winery. So I've been working with the vineyard for 2 years with Flowers, and then for over 10 years with LaRue. So starting in 2009, Rice-Spivak has been a part of my LaRue lineups from the very beginning. The first 2 vintages, 2009 and 2010, were not labeled as single vineyard. It was just Sonoma Coast. The 2009 had Rice-Spivak, Emmeline, and Joy Road in it. But my 2010 LaRue was 100% Rice-Spivak. I just didn't label it that way. So I didn't start doing single vineyard wines on the label till 2011. So it's kind of a backstory there. But Russell Rice and Helene Spivak are watching today, and they are the owners of Rice-Spivak. They planted the vineyard in 1999, and it is just about 7 acres, 6 to 7 acres. We have debates about exactly how big it is, of Pinot Noir. It's all planted to Pinot Noir in the kind of what we kind of refer to as, it's in the area of kind of West Sonoma Coast, although it's not a part of the proposed AVA. It has gold-rich sandy loam soils, which is very common for the area, but uniquely it also has volcanic ash in the soil. To me, that really shows in the wine in a really distinctive earthy character that you can pick out. Almost most people can taste this wine blind. It's definitely really distinctive of the area. Yeah.
Yeah, so just to touch on the West Sonoma Coast, I know that some of my favorite producers are part of that movement to get that AVA approved. Hopefully someday soon. And I just think it's such an important thing for where California wine is going. It's the natural next step to talk about wines in terms of terroir first, climate first. You know, just like in Burgundy, where there's one red grape and so many different expressions.
Yeah.
That's possible here in California. We just haven't been talking about it that way because our wines were set up sort of in a marketing society where it's make more sense to focus on the grape than where it's from. So I think now we're, you know, obviously there's no doubt of the quality. These are exceptional wines and all exceptional producers doing them or making them. But to talk about them in a new sense is really what's going to, I think, is just a necessary next step. And I think is really putting California in the right
direction.
Yeah, in the right space. And I think that, you know, whether or not these wines are in that or not, due to arcane AVA regulations and all that, which we can do another one of these on AVA regulations. I think, you know, philosophically, they're very lined up with I think what I love about the best current release wines from California.
And I think also, you know, in terms of the whole lineup, you have vineyards that are more coastal, like your Coastlands vineyard that you share with Ross Cobb and a number of other producers. You know, that's like 6 miles from the ocean, and this is a little bit further inland. So anyone who hasn't tasted, you know, the difference, it's amazing what like half a mile can do in terms of the style of the wine as the elevation and maybe the average temperature changes. And this is a pretty unique vineyard because you can make an argument that it could be part of the Western Sonoma Coast. You could also put it potentially in Russian River. You could put it in the Petaluma Wind Gap. But, you know, stylistically, in terms of your lineup, it feels more like Western Sonoma Coast styled wines.
Yeah, and it definitely, to me, the climate and soils fall more in line with the Western Sonoma Coast and the influence of the ocean and the fog, especially compared to like the direction of the wind and the fog that comes in definitely comes from the north versus the Petaluma Gap is coming a little bit more would be coming if it was coming from that wind tunnel. It would be coming from like the southeast or southwest. Sorry. So yeah, it is really interesting how there are so many different microclimates, and we're just beginning to explore what's happening, what we could have in the Sonoma Coast. We have many vineyards this vineyard was planted in 1999, so it's just over 20 years old now. And that's a baby compared to other regions of the world. And so it's kind of an exciting place to be, to kind of find out what we could do in our area.
Plus, you have that really unique soil you were talking about, the volcanic soil.
Yeah, the volcanic ash definitely does change the flavor profile of the wine.
Nice. You want to start going into tasting? We're really lucky to obviously have both of you here, and because you both are so talented, I figured we'd go through and taste kind of you two can taste through all three of them, kind of guide us through your tastings, and then we can kind of compare and contrast and the notes that you guys pick up. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
Yeah, and I could chat a little bit about the vintages as we taste as well. We'll start with the 2012. So this wine I made 125 cases of, and so winemaking wise, these are very similar in winemaking practices as far as the way my fermentations go and everything. But the main differences that we have in these three wines are the amount of whole cluster, the time in barrel, and the percentage of new oak. So the 2012 is 17 months in barrel, 40% new oak. I made 5 barrels, 2 were new, so 40%. And it was a mid-September harvest. So the 12th and the 17th of September, we had 2 different picking dates. And there's no whole cluster in this wine. So that's kind of a good place to start.
Yeah. you can taste right away for me that there's no stems in the wine. I mean, it's so much more about like that dark red fruit, a little bit of earth under that, but there's not that like green, really perfumey spice or like a rose petal quality that you would get from the other two wines that have a little bit more stem inclusion.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think even having gone through and tasted these backwards a little bit, what I love about Pinot, what I think people love about Pinot, can actually be one of the hardest things about Pinot is that, it's so delicious when it's younger, and these are obviously delicious when they're young, but you're starting to see, this is like the perfect window of 14 through 12, where Pinot Noir starts to, change over and start to drop a little bit of that fruit and reveal some of those savory characteristics, showing some of that, those soft tannins, those black tea notes and things like that. So just seeing it open up this whole new world for those who, can, exercise the self-control to go back on it. I just have to hide wine for myself. But yeah, no, I agree with you on the whole cluster. But I think that really serves on the mouthfeel, not having the whole cluster, because you just get such a great expression of those tannins. Like I mentioned earlier, Earl Grey tea. It's just like almost to the point of bergamot, because it's got Earl Grey with bergamot, like fresh bergamot in it. It's got that little bit of spice to it as well. It's just so great. I think this is hitting just about the perfect window.
Yeah, I love that we're tasting 3 different vintages. It wasn't that long ago when I remember when I first got in the wine industry, and distributors would like close out like the previous vintage just to move on onto the next. I think a lot of people who drink wine, especially a grape like Pinot Noir, the general thinking is that it can't age. It's just amazing, especially domestic Pinot Noir. People don't think about it like they think about very expensive Burgundy, that you need to hold on to it and, give it time to show and unravel. So it's really amazing to taste, 3 consecutive vintages of a really great vineyard. And, it's a testament to the fact that it just gets better and better. It certainly is a really age-worthy grape variety. And I mean, these are like all very much in the beginning of their life.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree that like we have a conception of California Pinot Noir not aging, and I really think that from a vineyard like Rice-Spivak that has such great acidity and concentration, and then made in this careful style meant for aging, I think it definitely has the potential to age for quite some time.
I mean, just as an example, last week we opened a bottle of 1978 Charles Crude Pinot, and it was stunning. And it was stunning for I don't know how it lasted.
Again, not a normal
That was pretty
house.
But just to make the point, I mean, Pinot can age. Don't be afraid to age it. It's got the acidity to carry it through for sure.
Someone just asked, would we decant the wine? Personally, I mean, I probably wouldn't. I don't decant wines that are showing really well. Like if it tastes great and there's not a ton of sediment in the wine, Pinot Noir doesn't really throw a sediment, at least, and if it's like 8 years old, it's not going to, but maybe much later in life it will. I probably wouldn't decant it unless I opened it up and I was like, it's really not showing as energetic as it should. Maybe it needs a little bit of air. And there's certainly some younger red Burgundies that I might decant if they're not showing as exciting of a way as I would hope they.
Yeah.
In fact, the answer I would have for the decanting is, don't just decant for how it tastes when it's opened. You basically want to pay attention to how it's going to develop in the glass. And if you use something to sort of hyper decant, like the Venturi or whatever, it'll aerate it quickly, but it's also going to set a higher pace of aeration. So to me, that I always say it's like fast forwarding through Citizen Kane. If you're gonna like hyperventilate a wine like that. So I mean, just if it seems like it's starting to show pretty, you're at the beginning of the arc. Let it show through in the glass.
Yeah. Sometimes that's the most interesting thing, to drink a wine over a few hours. Enjoy the whole bottle, take your time, and I think it's a good at this point. And
these wines absolutely have the complexity to do so for those of you familiar with the Lazy Bear list, we focus. I mean, 80% of our list is on much older wines.
Yeah.
And I'm very careful about which producers kind of fill those current release slots. Luckily Katie's been nice enough to give us some library selections and things like that as well. But I mean, this is what I'm looking for in current release wines. This is the complexity that I think is really hard to get when a wine is within its first 10 years of life. And I mean, I think that's why I've always responded to them. They've always been predictably great, but always unexpectedly exciting.
Yeah. And I think to that point, this is like purely a product. And one of the things that I think you do best is selecting really great sites, because you couldn't ever make a wine like this from a site that wasn't farmed
right
to the standards of the sites that you work with are. Like you wouldn't get anywhere close to this.
And for those of you who are saying we're hyping Katie, we are. It's true, but she's also far too young to do it herself. So we're taking care of that for her because we're making our time count.
I love it.
But going back to the 2012,
Yeah.
to me, it's pretty stark in comparison to 13 and 14, which both of those have some degree of stem inclusion during the fermentation, whereas 2012 is destemmed. And the style is just so different. 13 and 14 is just so much more aromatically intense and herbal, and it has this lift from the stems that are used. And one of the things that I like about your lineup is it's not just dogmatic. And there are some producers who make wine that way, that always do everything the same way, and it works out really well, and
right.
That's great. But I like that you look at what the vineyard needs, and there are some vineyards that you farm that you almost always ascribe whole cluster to, and there are some vineyards that you never do. And then this one, it kind of depends on the vintage. So some vintages you might destem, some you don't.
Yeah, so so for the vineyards that Coastlands Vineyard is one that I almost always do whole cluster in. The vines are the oldest vines that I work with. That really does play an impact on my decision making for whole cluster or no whole cluster. And then the other is the vigor of the vineyard and the vintage itself and the timing of harvest. So if I'm picking if it's an earlier harvest and the vines haven't started shutting down at all, if they're still very actively growing, I might be less likely to do whole cluster. I'm more particular about the stemmy green character that can happen with whole cluster. It doesn't always happen, but I'm more apprehensive about that. For me, I want my first impression of the wines to be bright, beautiful fruit, and that not to be the very first impression. So for me, it depends on the vintage. In 2012, I didn't feel like it was the vintage I would like to do whole cluster on. In 13 and 14, both were years, although the harvests were slightly earlier, the vines were in a different place than they were in 2012. And I did the whole cluster on the second pick of the harvest as well. We typically pick the vineyard in 2 and sometimes 3 picks throughout. So the different blocks of the different clones of Pinot Noir get picked at different times. So the second pick is usually the Swan clone, and that I have done whole cluster on. So in the 2013, we can chat about that next. 2013 I fermented the Swan and 115 clones together. That year we did pick the 115 at the same time as the Swan, which is not normal for us. And I feel like that 2013 naturally just had a lot of tannin to give. I didn't leave my wine on the skins for as long as during the fermentation as other vintages, because it was just so giving right off the bat, the tannin from the skins and the seeds a bit as well. So yeah, this is the 2013 it's about overall 5% in the blend whole cluster.
Katie, how much percentage wise of the Swan clone do you have? Because the 13 shows more Swan clone than the other two to me, just because it's got that kind of like black fruit, savory, almost like raspberry leaf note to it. It's a little more herbaceous and I don't know, like bristly in a way.
Yeah. totally agree.
Yeah, the percentage depends year to year because I typically will ferment the clones separately and then blend the clone, choose my barrels like a few months before bottling. But in 2013, I fermented the Swan and 115 together, and then so it's about 1/3 Swan. The 2012 definitely was less. I don't know the exact percentage off the top of my head, but it was a lot less. And then 14 would have been maybe about 25 to 30%. So yeah, I would say the 13 has the most Swan in it.
So, someone asked, what would we pair the 2012 with? Mom wants to know.
Oh,
Someone's mom wants to know.
That's my grandma.
Smoked duck.
Yeah, I was just about to say. We have a Sonoma
that's a question
duckling.
for you guys, I believe.
We have a Sonoma duckling on. Well, up until last month we had a Sonoma duckling on the menu. Duckling on the menu at Mina, and that's just such a killer protein to pair with Pinot Noir. But at the end of the day, one of the greatest things about Pinot Noirs, especially really great Pinot Noir, is that it's just so versatile. You could pair it with firmer fish dishes. It can go up. It can pair with almost everything up to like a super dense, like ribeye. Maybe you don't want like that cut of red meat, but it can go with some lighter red meats as well.
Yeah, I still, after working at Hakkasan for so long, Pinot Noir was my favorite red to go. As long as it wasn't too spicy or there wasn't any form of like sweet and sour, obviously, with the dish. Like Asian food and anything umami flavored with the flavors that you typically get from Pinot Noir were such a great treat. So for me, I always go back to that.
Well, and I think you could say too that the 12 of this lineup would be most likely, if you did have a little spice, would be okay because those tannins have fallen back a little bit. And your main fear with spice is that it's pulling out the bitterness of tannin, so that's softened a bit. And actually, to me, I was thinking about pairing this. Obviously, I said duck. I think other like game birds, squab, things like that would work really well. It's even got some characteristics that I get out of very lighter style of Grenache, which is great because it's got like stewed pretty fruits, but also that underlying earthiness. So it is sort of that rare balance of earth driven and fruit driven, which is so hard to find. It can pick up a lot. It can pick up pepper. It can pick up smoke. It can pick up that black tea and even those like more coffee savory notes as well.
Yeah. Nice. So what do you guys think of the 13?
I think it's rocking.
I think to me, the 13 in this lineup, it's kind of in between the two. The 14 is definitely the featherweight. It's so light on its feet, and I mean, it's super, super graceful. Not that the others aren't, but it's just on a different level of just super, super light and so delicate. Whereas the 12 is the opposite. It's very dense, like broad-shouldered, firmer tannins. The 13 is kind of in between the two stylistically to me.
Yeah.
And that's interesting you say that because saying that about the 14, the yields in 14 were slightly higher than 12 and 13. So that would make sense that it has a little less dense concentration.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, the stems just give it, on the 13 and 14, give it an extra lift of aromatics that you don't have with the 12. The 12 is much more about like this power, but with the stems in the 14, I think you get way more of this delicate feel due to the aromatics.
Yeah, like if I was blind tasting, I would probably have called the 12 Old World of the three.
Yeah,
right, because it's just like it seems more acid driven in a good way. And I think what I also love about these in varying forms is that maybe it's I can't remember. I've been having an ongoing conversation with somebody about Pinot Noir and tannins, and I think because it's a thinner skin grape, we don't talk about tannins enough.
Right.
But I actually think they have a greater influence than thicker skin grapes at times because everything else that would be balancing it out is so much softer, and it is amazing to me to see. Well, from the 14 to the 12, how you get those sort of flip-flopping. I think you get much more fruit on the 14 with the tannins in the background, and by the time you get to the 12, the tannins taken over a little bit more. It's gotten a little more savory. But even having had slightly older wines years and current release wines, it's cool to see that balance and very thoughtful use of tannins in the bar.
Yeah, I've always been really impressed with your tannins, just because they're never overbearing, but they're still present at the same time, which they're so subtle and soft when you're drinking them on their own, which makes it wonderful just to kind of hang around and drink. But it allows it to go with food so gracefully, which I think is really, really nice.
I also think that you use like the perfect amount of new oak for the wines that you make. You know, I love what a little bit of new oak can do to a really great site, and some producers don't want to use any, and that's great. There's a lot of great wines that are made in that way, and there's some really great wines that are made with a lot more oak, but I love that you ride this really fine line of you get all of that like star anise and nutmeg and clove, but it's so delicate. If you don't think about it, you would miss it. If you think about picking it out, it's not like a dominating feature of the wine.
And when I first tried these, I try not to look at all the technical specs before I taste, because I feel like it takes me in the wrong direction. I was surprised to find how much oak was actually on each of these after I first tasted them, because you're talking, 33 to 40% new oak for give or take a year and a half. That's a decent amount, especially for one of these, wine that it's more subtle.
Yeah.
This is gonna be a weird analogy and a total non sequitur. I'm gonna go with it though. Let me pull that. I had a teacher in school who used to tell me that you should talk just softly enough so people have to shut up to listen. That's what these wines do to me. And to see that there was that much oak on these without, and they were still that beautifully balanced was surprising and impressive.
Yeah.
So I agree with your comment.
I look at tannin as a combination of oak tannin and then tannin from seeds and stems. And for me, a big part of the tannin that's coming from the grapes themselves really is the impact is how long I'm leaving it on the skin. So after it's finished with fermentation, I'm tasting every day, sometimes twice a day. And so these are very different as far as how long they were on skins from the day I picked to the day I pressed the wines. And at that tail end, it's tasting and it's waiting for those tannins to feel right. So in the 2012, it was closer to like a little over 20 days. The 2013, those tannins from the grapes were coming so easily, it was like 16, 17 days. And then the 14 was probably a little over 20 days as well. But my 2015s, which we're not trying today, but those I left on for over 30 days because it needed time. And then I look at the oak tannin, and for me, it's choosing the right barrels for your wine and for your site. I'm working with a forest near Burgundy. Châtenay has become one of my favorite forests for my Pinot Noir sites. It can be very delicate and kind of really my goal is to uplift the wine. You don't want to overpower it. You don't want to, you want it to integrate well, and having that time in barrel as well. When you're in barrel for 17, 20 months, it gives more time. It's kind of counterintuitive. It becomes more integrated over time. So.
And you probably have more of a medium minus toast on it.
Yeah, so mainly medium or a long light toast is another. Yeah.
Did you get a chance to see the question?
Oh yeah, so there's a question. Do you select the barrels for the Sonoma Coast blend at the beginning or the end? It is actually a few months before bottling. So I will ferment all of my wines, my different blocks from the different vineyards, for the most part, are fermented separately. Some years are different, like the 13. And then after they're in barrel, I'm treating those barrels as individual wines for the majority of their life. So I will go through and taste each barrel, and when I'm tasting, I will be checking the leaves. So I have a thief that will check the very bottom of the barrel. I'll be smelling those leaves, and I might decide to rack one barrel and not the other in the same like Rice-Spivak Swan clone. And racking is just taking, for those who are not familiar, racking is just taking the clear wine off of the sediment as it ages. You usually put it into a tank or another vessel and wash the barrel and put it back in. So I'm doing my rackings of barrel to barrel. So by the time that they've been in barrel for about 15, 16 months, they all taste completely different. And that's when I'm choosing my single vineyard wines versus Sonoma Coast wine. So that is that's how they are so distinctive, even though the Sonoma Coast is a blend of only the single vineyard wines. So it's not necessarily an area of each vineyard, it's a barrel selection.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool.
What do you guys the 14?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
We'll get back there. We'll go to the 14.
Oh, I just mentioned about the 14 that to me that was, of the bunch, it was the featherweight. It's also the most emblematic of, I think, the site's ability to produce these super, super aromatic wines that you could only get with a volcanic soil. Like, it almost reminds me of like Etna, how you get that incredible aromatic intensity. And not to say that, Pinot Noir is anything like Norello Mascalese on Mount Etna in Sicily, but there's a feel to wines from volcanic soils that you wouldn't get. And I'm sure, because this is the only vineyard that you have with volcanic soils,
right.
Farm, or at least for reds, it's, I think, pretty unique in your lineup. I think that I'd be curious your thoughts on that. Do you find that this one is always the most aromatic and intense because of that? And maybe for what would otherwise be a pretty warm site due to how far inland it is, do you think that volcanic ashy soil kind of pulls back the power?
Yeah, I do think that it is one of the more dynamic aromatically. Like the fruit profile is definitely usually red fruits and more cherry, raspberry, and it always has this really interesting earthy character to the wine that I do attribute to the soil there, versus Thorn Ridge, which is just a little bit further north and much higher elevation. It tends to have more, even though it doesn't always get quite as ripe, it has more ripe fruit profile. So the profile is more like blackberry, plum, which you would normally attribute to a more ripe vineyard, but it's not. So it's an interesting dichotomy. And then, or Emmeline Ann Vineyard is like more, even further towards the coast, is more of that forest floor, different type of earthy character along with a more red fruit. So I do think Rice-Spivak has a dynamic that's different from any of my other vineyards, and I do attribute that to the soil for sure.
And I think in the 14, it's far more palpable. There's something. It almost is. We're talking about it being a taste and an aromatic, but it's almost more of a sensation in the 14. It's actually like on the back end, almost making it a little sprightly.
Mm-hmm. I can see that, definitely. Does anybody have any other questions for us? Got a few questions out there.
Artie has the fermentation temp.
Oh, yeah, there was a question about...
We've got winemakers on this thread, okay?
Yeah, I know. Can you talk about fermentation temperatures and your preferences? So yes, I do typically do a cold soak at the beginning of fermentation. So that will be anywhere from 2 to 3 days to 7 days, and that I'm keeping 50, 55 degrees. And during that time, I'm stabilizing color, and you're balancing out the sugars, so and acidity, and it's giving it some time for a bit of maceration. And then after that time, I'm fermenting, and once it's fermenting, I don't let my wines get too hot. So low 80s would be pretty normal. Some vintages, the 13 definitely got warmer in fermentation. I distinctly remember that happened. It was like almost 90 degrees in the cap. And then at the end, I just let the temperature be what it is. So towards the tail end of fermentation, I'm not heating or cooling, and that just becomes ambient temperature.
Yeah.
And I think one other thing that we should mention about this, the LaRue wines as a whole, is how you really just do everything yourself. Like you don't have, other than David and one other person, Lauren helping in the office.
Yeah.
With the website and sales, you're doing everything from picking up the grapes to harvesting them, and you might have had the option to grow it into a bigger winery, but you've chosen to keep it small. And these wines, you only make 125 cases of a year, and you've done that, made that decision so you could have your hands really on all of the grapes and make sure that the quality is where it is.
Yeah.
So I would actually say for you in California, those of you not in California, when I you can maybe speak to this too. When I moved here from St. Louis, there were we got a good amount of great California wines, but when I came here, there were things that I'd never had a chance to try before, and some I hadn't heard of. There was Cerritos or Cobb, who you work with, and then of course LaRue, and we just hadn't come across them because they make so little, and they're so beloved by the locals that they hardly get out. Anyone watching who's not in California, get on the mailing list because you want to get your spot. Get your spot while you can, and get these where you can, because they're really great and they age beautifully.
Thank you. Yeah, it has been a goal of mine from the very beginning to keep LaRue small. That wasn't my business plan. My dad just made a comment that he also helps out a lot, and that's very true. He's bottled every Magnum we've ever made, and he barbecues for us all the time.
Amazing barbecue, or hashtag Katie's dad.
Oh, actually, somebody has a question that I was actually about to pose to about 2011. The question is, when did you, Katie, open 2011 Rice-Spivak to enjoy? While you're answering that, I'd also be curious to hear, since 2011 was such a notoriously cold vintage, sommeliers actually, and winemakers, I think, love how it's turned out. It got panned across the board. I would love to hear your thoughts between the 2011 and the 2012 as you answer that question.
Yeah, so they are very different wines. We did pick before the rain started at Rice-Spivak, or the first pick, which we did get before the rain, which was the pick that I got the fruit from. So it definitely, it's interesting. I actually haven't opened a bottle of that in quite some time because I don't have very many bottles. I only made 50 cases. I had very, very little wine that year. But I do think it definitely is not as fruit driven as the 2012. It's a little bit lighter in color, a little bit lighter in body as well. The 2012 was more of a really even vintage with the tannins being more powerful. And 2011 was really cold, but I think those wines will age and are really beautiful. We did taste so I did try that wine in August, because we did taste every wine I've ever made out of Magnums in our 10-year anniversary release party that we had in August. So that wine in the lineup was definitely showing well. The 2009 and 10, I think I was most excited about, just because those were my first two vintages and they're still very much alive. But yeah, I would say you could open the 2011 now, or and it's really hard since I haven't tasted it in a few months. But yeah,
as a sommelier, if I was serving it, I would most like that would be the one that I would actually decant a little more, because I think the tannins are probably a little more intense with it, and you need those to back off a little bit before everything else kind of comes into balance. But I mean, enjoy away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that all these are very delicious now, but the true characteristics of a great wine really take a very long time to unravel. So all of these, I think, are very much in the beginning of their life, and they'll become more and more different from one another. If you have patience, if you wait 10, 12 years, if you taste these three side by side, they'll be so much more drastically different than that. Right now, it's really difficult to tell the differences between these three consecutive vintages from the site, even though they're in some ways, they're different from another. But as the wines age, they're going to continue to become more different than one another, which is one of the kind of pleasures of aging wine. So I think if you have those wines, you should be patient. It's not going bad.
I think outside of California, the ageability of domestic wines is highly underrated. And I know Jeremy was a big component of me when I first moved here to San Francisco, just kind of like introducing me to a lot of older domestic stuff that completely blew my mind. And then I met people like Matt, like Evan, and it was just, it's just really highly underrated. And these wines age so beautifully, and the level of winemaking has increased so much. It's really kind of astonishing and really, really wonderful to kind of experience and go along an adventure with how they mature and age.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we should also talk about. I know you have another Instagram live that you're doing next week.
Yes.
I believe with about the Charles Heinz Vineyard. Matt and I, in preparation for this today, we took the liberty of enjoying a 2018 Heinz Chardonnay, Heinz Chardonnay last night, and it was just absolutely mind blowing. And I remember one very late night when we were all drinking a bunch of wine. We got in a very deep conversation about Charles Heinz Vineyard, and you mentioned to me that it was the Montrachet of the Sonoma Coast. And for some reason, I remembered that, and I instantly remembered
because you were
it.
probably automatically, immediately, offended just as a person. And then,
But when we tasted the wine last night, I was just struck by how balanced it was, but also at the same time it was so opulent and rich. It just like your Pinots, it kind of walked the line of having the best of both worlds. So although we've just been talking about Pinot Noir today, your Chardonnays are also, in particular, the Heinz Chardonnay is pretty epic.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited that we're going to have it's next Sunday at 4. We're going to have Charlie Heinz on. And his vineyard is one of the vineyards when I started LaRue, I knew I wanted to make Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, but I wanted to find a Chardonnay vineyard in the area that I make my Pinot Noirs from. So we're talking Western Sonoma Coast, really close to the ocean. And the one vineyard that I immediately knew I wanted to work with was Charlie Heinz. And I had worked with the vineyard at Flowers, so when I was there in 2007 and 2008, and I knew that I loved the fruit, and it took me 5 years to get the fruit. So 2014 was the first vintage of Heinz for LaRue. But now I'm getting the fruit every year. This is definitely, my Chardonnays are definitely underrated. Or not, I guess that's not the right word, but
I love your Chardonnay. I'm a Chardonnay guy, but
well, I think people know of you as a Pinot Noir producer because of you being singled out by John Bonet and in Pursuit of Balance. People don't think of you when they think of California Chardonnay immediately, but I think that
well, one of the
Heinz Chardonnay is one of the best in Sonoma right now.
And one of the other reasons is that the Chardonnay typically goes almost all through to the mailing list and wine club. So that doesn't make it out into restaurants very much. A few restaurants, but not many. So yeah, we're really excited. Heinz is one of the iconic vineyards of our area, so we're really excited to have Charlie on next week. And that's going to be awesome. So we have, just to mention again, we have our wines available for purchase on our website right now. You can follow the link in our bio.
Yep.
Bio.
1 cent shipping.
With 1 cent shipping, and also the Heinz. So next week we're tasting 2017 and 2018 Charles Heinz Vineyard. So both of those are available for purchase right now as well. And also, would you guys be able to mention the websites for your restaurants again for people to order?
Yeah.
And wine.
So it's Mina Family Kitchen, and it's Chef Michael Mina. We have 4 restaurants. I'm sorry, in the Bay Area that are operating jointly and offering all 4 menus under the same service. So that's available on Caviar, DoorDash. A number of other delivery services under Mina Family Kitchen.
Is Mina offering caviar? Like the little top.
I'm not certain. I'll have to double check. I wouldn't put it past them.
That thing is so amazing.
Well,
if you get really nostalgic, you can always make your own tuna tartare like someone did the other day at their house.
well, I'll take that segue. Lazy Bear's offering caviar. We've been doing, we do our commissary, which we don't do website ordering, but we have been doing it Wednesday through Sunday. Although my best recommendation would be to jump on and follow the Lazy Bear SF Instagram page or Lazy Bear Wine, because that has updates on when we're open, because obviously, circumstances are changing on a daily basis here. So usually Wednesday through Sunday, 10 to 5. If you want butter, get there before we open, because it runs out quickly. But
butter is so good.
Yeah, and if anyone's looking for some fun stuff from the cellar, feel free to reach out to me directly through Lazy Bear Wine or at Som_antics on Instagram.
Nice. All right, guys.
Awesome. Thank you
Cool.
so
Thanks so much.
much. And if everybody watching, if you missed the beginning, we will be posting this on our page and also the LaRue Wines YouTube page. We've just opened up.
The YouTube stars now.
Look at that.
But yeah, thank you guys so much. It was awesome tasting with you, and have a great
Bye, guys. Bye, everyone. Thank you
Thank
again.
you.
Cheers.
All right.